Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you live at Film Fanatic headquarters. And Merry Christmas. It is about 10 after 10. So, I was debating, being that today is Christmas, of doing a Christmas movie. I went back and forth. I did two shows recently on the channel that were all Christmas oriented. I did a big show yesterday on YouTube where I did a big kind of synopsis of Christmas and all the Christmas films that bring me back to that nostalgic period, around Christmas, growing up as a kid, where I'm at as an adult, and a lot of the movies that I grew up watching, and a lot of the movies that I love. And so that show was all about Christmas and, of course, movie centric. I focused on Die Hard, all the classic Christmas movies, Die Hard, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I mostly focused on those films, but I also mentioned, a bunch of others. And then a week or two ago, I did a show on The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, which probably, is, I don't know, arguably the best Christmas movie that there ever is, and that there ever was. And that's the original from 1966, the animated version with Boris Karloff, who plays the Grinch. So I did a show on that also, and I had just recently picked that up on Blu-ray, and it's an amazing movie. So I've done two big Christmas shows, and today is Christmas Day. It's a real, you know fun time. I mean, who doesn't love gifts? Who doesn't love giving gifts and maybe finding that one or two special gifts for someone you care about that will, you know, give that person that, the Christmas joy of, something that they wanted. And it's funny because Christmas really isn't, it's a, everything, everything now around holidays, particularly around Halloween and Christmas, it's always this big, well, for most people, it's this big giant ordeal, and I can understand that. I've been through that too. But and that mostly pertains to everything that is, commercialism in our country that we live in, and the whole consumerism thing. Halloween and Christmas are the two biggest holidays, as far as, just aside from it being probably the most popular holidays, like socially for people. But from a consumer perspective, those are obviously the two biggest holidays. And I remember it was like maybe less than 10 years ago, Halloween was is one holiday that I feel has gotten even bigger over the years, as far as from a consumer standpoint. And it's like second behind Christmas as far as the amount of coverage of the holiday and the amount of money that, people spend on costumes and all those kinds of things. And I've always thought they're very similar in a lot of ways because, you know, they're all so both holidays are so steeped in kind of ritualistic practice, really. We love to, we're social creatures, we're animals, and we love to congregate. We love to have a celebratory experience with either a close group of friends or a close group of relatives. We love having that kind of collective experience. Also, where there's like pageantry. I've always thought that too, where, you know, you have like the perspective of people who say are, religious, and then people who are not religious, and they consider themselves to be atheists. A lot of the times, and for me, I'm obviously not part of the Christian ideology, and I consider myself an atheist, but I also believe that the essence of Christmas and the holidays aren't really about necessarily whether or not you believe in some kind of deity or God, particularly around Christmas. There's always been this argument, and from like the atheistic point of view, that people, you know, need to have a perspective in science and rational inquiry about the world, but using science as that needle to kind of judge where you are as a person and how you interact with your society, and as far as your relationship to or the idea around faith. And so the idea from a lot of an atheistic perspective is that, well, it's the land of make believe. God doesn't exist. It's a fictional thing, or the essence of God is a fictional thing. It's man made. And in my own opinion, I believe that. I believe I've talked about that a lot in shows before, where I've talked a lot about influences, writers and philosophers that I always gravitate towards, and I feel really aligned to their perspective. And one I've talked a lot about is Joseph Campbell. And basically, he did such a great job with his work and his writing, kind of exposing the idea of what, the power of myth, and how we're all kind of connected through that in our various cultures, and there's a lineage to all of it. But essentially, it comes down to, man creates these images, man creates these gods, and I totally subscribe to that idea. I also believe the universe itself is indifferent to us. We don't really, there isn't an intrinsic meaning to anything or to our lives. I think it's up to each person, whether you're doing it from an individual perspective or a collective, but more so around the individual. The universe is indifferent. Mother Nature, if you want to call it that, doesn't really have an opinion one way or another about us, or has any kind of interaction with us. It just does what it does. So there is no, I feel in my own world, like there is no real intrinsic meaning to anything, or to any an idea or an understanding as to why we're here. I don't think there is. It's an indifferent and a gray question. It's so I feel like it's really up to to people to kind of create that meaning and to create that idea of what gets you out of bed in the morning, and what gets you excited, and what your passions are. And maybe in your throughout your life, you might want to leave a mark for in some kind of area that maybe people remember you by, or that you're known for. And that's really what I think the essence is, as far as the idea of God and the idea of man and nature versus man, and the indifference around the idea. I always love the notion of, I think one of the best movies that does that, I think tackles that kind of perspective, is a movie that came out quite a few years ago with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves, called The Devil's Advocate. And that's such an awesome horror movie. But essentially, Al Pacino plays the devil, and his whole perspective is that he feels that God is like the absentee landlord. He doesn't call when he's called upon. He just does what he does, and he's indifferent to what you being the person, or the the party, doesn't have any kind of interaction to that person. He just does what he does, and does not look over you in any shape or form. And I always thought that was a really, in a nutshell, for me at least, my personal philosophy. That's what religion is to me. But at the same time, the one thing that I don't agree a lot with, as far as the atheistic perspective, is that because they use an idea of science, which I agree with, and they use the idea of, like, trying to be having a rational approach to how you set up your own personal system, that the idea of, ritual, the idea of social gatherings, and the integral, you know, need that religion has provided. Yes, religion has also, many people have died in the name of religion and continue so, which is an unfortunate thing. But the actual idea of being drawn to that essence of where there is ritual, pageantry, and there's some form of collective, that's like an integral part of our species, and that's always going to be there. And sometimes the atheistic, I see in the atheistic world, or the atheist from a view from the atheistic perspective, is, well, all of those things should be thrown out. Mythology, and that the idea of ritual and that lineage to, where that connects with people, is, because it's make believe, it should be thrown out. But I feel like, well, that is a really important part of our species. That's those those gods that we create represent our desires, represent our yearnings to be human, and they also express, the complex, experience of what it is to be human. And I feel like that's really important. And the idea of ritual, and the kind of the mechanism of religion, I feel, with the notion of of that ritual or ritualistic aspect to how we live our lives, that's part of us anyway. Like, whether or not we believe in God, or whether or not we believe that religions should fall by the wayside, organized religions. We all go to baseball games. We all go to rock concerts. We all go to movies. We all have birthday parties. We all celebrate Christmas, or not, but we all go out to dinner, or we go to, say, a business is having an opening. Those are all like ritualistic experiences that we have. It's still that essence. The essence of that is being in a dark space where there are lights used, there's pageantry, and it's used as a celebratory experience. We light candles on a birthday cake. Like, that's as ritualistic as you can get. So that's just a part of how we celebrate. Or we go to a funeral, we go to a wedding. It's all ritual. And so it's all the same thing. You go to a rock concert and you're there as a collective. So you're celebrating with a group of strangers or a group of people, but you're still taking yourself out of the mundane experience and ritualistically expressing yourself. So I feel like that is just a part of us, and that's something that we always have in us, and will always have in us as a species. And I feel like that connection to the idea of religion is kind of an integral part. And so, whether, I don't agree with the idea a lot of the times with the atheistic view that, well, because it's not the essence of the idea of a higher power, doesn't fuse well with the idea of science, well, then all of it should be thrown out, because we do lots of those things anyway. We celebrate in that way routinely. And so, over the last 10 years or so, like, Halloween has exploded as far as being a commercial thing, and Christmas obviously, all has. And I know a lot of people have a real cynical view of Christmas and the holidays, particularly around Christmas. It can be tough for people. A lot of the times, for family gatherings, it's the thing of where people feel like they're obligated to congregate with their families, and maybe have to be in the same room with a family member they just don't get along with, or there's some kind of tension, and the families are, in these dysfunctional situations, and that's totally understandable. So it brings about lots of, negative emotions, and you kind of dread that experience. And unfortunately, a lot of people have to go through that. So, and then also the idea too with the consumerism aspect of it is that, there is this idea that in order to, prove your love, or your that you care for this person or that person in, in your family or in your social circle, you have to like spend, lots of money, and that's how you really celebrate the holidays. But and I feel like the essence of Christmas has gotten obviously lost in that whole kind of thing. But if I feel like if you strip all that garbage away, which doesn't mean anything, I think it's really, it's about that integral experience of like being with somebody you care about, being happy, being with your friends or your family, and or even the select people you want to be with, and having and breaking bread and doing that, having that intimate experience. Recently, we just had a massive storm in Maine that was really bad. It was virtually like this hurricane that blew through here, and it was pretty devastating. We were lucky here in the great city of Northport, but a lot of other folks were not, and the weather was pretty kind of frightening at times. There was massive flooding, lots of power outages. People just lost their power the other day, or just I know a few folks just got their power back like last night. So very intense storm. But when I went to Belfast yesterday and I was coming home, I noticed that there was a big sign at the Belfast Library, which has been the local library in Belfast for forever. And I noticed they had a sign that was put up during the storm where they opened up the place for basically anybody who lost power and heat, and they could go in and just hang out and be in a warm environment with their friends or their family. And they created this. The library created this open space where, for the local community, the people that were less fortunate that lost their power because of this monstrous storm. And I drove by the library yesterday, and I saw that sign, and I was like, wow, like that's pretty amazing. That's pretty awesome. And to me, in a lot of ways, that's really what Christmas is. Like, I think that's a Christmas gift, and that's not really about, having to buy all this stuff and crap that people really might not want, or feel obligated they need to do this or that. And I'm like, that's, when you live in a community that has good folks and there's a deep connection, like that for me was an example of like that's what Christmas is, and and also testimony to a really great uh, community that we live in. So that that being said, I haven't opened up any presents yet from Santa Claus, so I'm looking forward to it. And fingers crossed, I got some sweet gift certificates to Bull Moose, so I can buy more movies. So this brings me today. Again, I was thinking about what movie should I do today. It is Christmas Day. I did two Christmas specials already. I love Christmas. Christmas has always been one of my favorite holidays. I, I, you know, just love it. I love it for the same reasons. Again, for me, Halloween's my favorite, but Christmas is right up there. I love the lights and decorating, and the whole pageantry around it, the whole ritualistic aspect of it. There's so many great movies along with Halloween. There's so many great movies tied to that. So the holidays for me always mean a lot, and from a nostalgic purpose, or from a nostalgic place, and also where I am now as an old curmudgeony old man. The all of those movies. There's so many movies that are tied to the holidays, and so I was going back and forth today about, or thinking of ideas of what movie do I want to do a straight up Christmas show? But I was like, well, I kind of already did that, so but I'll do something that's kind of similar or kind of tied in with it. So this is a movie that I just saw for the first time. I just bought it the other day, and it's on the Severin. Severin is one of the best companies right now that's putting out exploitation movies. Like Severin is just amazing. There's Severin. I've talked about the various companies that are out there that are reissuing a lot of these great grindhouse movies and exploitation movies. There's Severin. There's Blue Underground. There's there's so many great ones. There's so many. Mondo Macabre is my favorite. Probably might be my favorite. Blue Underground is probably my favorite. There's so many great labels, and Severin just cranks out all of these great movies. The one label, Mondo Macabre, probably specializes even in more like obscure films, but Severin does an amazing job. And this is a movie I just saw for the first time, and I picked it up. I picked it up 2 days ago at Bull Moose Music, and it's called The Day of Judgment: The Night He Came to Collect His Own. And this movie is just totally wild and totally strange, and one of the most original movies I've seen in a long time. And it's a slasher movie. It came out in 1981, and it's almost like it's hard to describe this movie, but being that it is Christmas and it's Christmas Day, this film does have this. It's kind of looked at as almost like, to a degree, a Christian propaganda film that was originally, it was a movie that was created as a little bit of a, well, kind of a thing that was going to be shown in churches, and then eventually was re-edited and it was made more into a slasher film, because it does deal with religious themes. It does deal with, to a degree, Christian philosophy. But then before it was released, the filmmakers decided to make it more into a slasher film. So it was recut and re-edited, and then it was released as A Day of Judgment. And I believe that this movie never actually got any theatrical release. It was released directly to VHS back in the days, and this came out in 1981. And it, like, again, it deals with like some Christian, or to a degree, universal traits about people who are generally corrupted. They cheat on their wives. They rob from people. They also people who commit murder, and people who take advantage of other people. It has kind of a universal thing. It is steeped a little bit in the whole Christian idea or Christian perspective of that, but also it does have these universal traits of people who generally do bad things, and that there can be retribution or repercussions for their actions. So it's a really interesting movie. It's unlike any movie I've ever seen before, and some of the themes in this film are just wild. And I love this movie. I never saw this film. I totally bought this on a whim. And again, this is from Severin, and the Blu-ray package is amazing. This came out from 1981. I've talked a lot about it before. The slasher genre is probably my favorite in the whole like exploitation world. I love. There's nothing better. There's nothing more that I enjoy than a really good, raw, sleazy, rough and ready slasher film. I just love it. I love I love that whole like aesthetic. My favorite period from the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. I've been buying tons of movies that are right from 81 and just amazing. And some of the reviews on this package are just like so stellar and just totally nail it. A true joy to behold. It may be one of the most unusual entries made during the golden age of slasher films. I think that totally sums this film up. This is the world. This recently just came out too. This just came out on Blu-ray. This was the worldwide Blu-ray release premiere of this film from Owensky Studios. The South's big, and the Owensky Studios were a company in the '70s that specialized in cranking out all kinds of exploitation movies, mostly horror exploitation movies. And the Owensby Studios, the South's biggest producer and distributor of '70s and '80s regional horror and exploitation hits, comes what may be the most obscure and bizarre slasher movie of their entire godless genre. In a 1930s small town rife with lust, corruption, and sin, a mysterious figure wielding a scythe arrives to cut an unholy swath of murder, madness, and moralizing that may lead you straight to hell. William T. Hicks, Death Screams, Brownlee Davis from The Wolfman, Jeremy Rushing, Final Exam, and Harris Bloodsworth star in this early '80s oddity worth seeing as something very, very different. And it was produced by Earl Owensby, Tales of the Third Dimension, and Worth Keeter, L.A. Bounty. Now, and this film was scanned from in 2K from the original negative. And it says also a slasher movie for the whole family. Here it is, folks. The first and probably the only the only Christian slasher movie ever made. And it was directed by C.D.H. Reynolds. Such an unusual movie. And the acting in this film is so good. Like, at times it feels like it's a TV movie, but it doesn't. It has a little bit more of a cinematic kind of flair. You feel like you're watching a movie, but the acting is so terrific in this, and the acting, the story is really interesting. I love the killer in this film, who's like kind of this Grim Reaper character. And after these people, this group of people commit these pretty atrocious acts in this small town, they're all picked off by this Grim Reaper figure. And really awesome. I mean, it's really creepy. The cinematography is really great. It's super low budget and it's really cheesy and terrible, but it's also um, just so great. I was totally blown away by this movie. Super impressed. Never seen this movie before. Totally obscure movie. Totally obscure movie. And it's interesting. The special features on here are really fantastic. And there's a really great interview with Stephen Thrower, who does all kinds of discussions and talks on a lot of these special features, packages. And he talks a lot about where he like interviewed, Worth Keeter and the writer Tom McIntyre, and particularly around, because the movie itself has this kind of Christian stand, and it kind of started off, the idea of it kind of started off as a Christian propaganda film, but then they decided to turn it into more of a commercial slasher film to a degree. They interview, the director and filmmaker Worth Cater, and also C.O.H. Reynolds, about the idea that this film was kind of looked at, originally it was looked at as kind of a Christian propaganda film. And they're, the filmmakers were atheistic. They were atheists, and they were like, well, the themes of the film are basically universal things of people who, regardless of your faith, are doing some pretty bad things. So they're kind of getting, just rewards after committing these, pretty terrible acts to other people. So it really isn't, they feel like the film really isn't a Christian. These are all acts that these people commit that universally people would, probably condemn as being like these people are scumbags and they kind of deserve to be punished. So he doesn't really look at the filmmakers don't really look at it as a Christian movie per se or a Christian propaganda film, but super cool movie. I was super impressed with this. The transfer of this on Blu-ray is pretty amazing. The the sight and sound is just fantastic, and again, that's one of the greatest things that I enjoy about diving deep into the whole grindhouse world is discovering these weird movies that I've never heard about before and never seen, and it's all it just opens up all these new worlds and possibilities, and this was one of them. This is a fantastic movie. I'm looking forward to watching this again, and again, Day of Judgment, killer movie, 1981. I highly highly recommend this movie, and it's not like it doesn't have a lot of gore. It's not particularly a sleazy movie, but it's super raw. It has a real grindhouse feel to it, but the story is really interesting. The acting is like really great. The kills are really great, and the Grim Reaper figure, the slasher, the killer, is really great. Really menacing. So, yeah, I hope everyone today has a great Christmas and Santa treats everyone uh, incredibly well, and hopefully people are having a good time with friends or family. So, Merry Christmas, everyone. And this is Jason Dean, and we will see you very, very soon. Peace.